Well, first of all, let me just say that DEI, and it's a construct of DEI, hasn't even been around long enough to even make that kind of a claim. We've had diversity of viewpoints, diversity ideas, not just in the federal government, but in the private sector for decades.
In this video, Chris Cuomo welcomes Congressman Byron Donalds onto his show on News Nation. Chris Cuomo and Byron Donalds discuss DEI, and the congressman points out its many failures. With that, let's watch Byron Donalds crush DEI policies on Chris Cuomo's show.
Joining me now, Florida member of Congress, Republican Byron Donalds. Good to see you. Happy New Year to you and the family.
Good to be with you, man. Happy New Year.
So, Byron, the main concern is if DEI isn't forced as a focus, you will not have representation and inclusion of minorities, regardless of foundation of merit. And that's why it needs to be a point of emphasis. What is your response to that argument, and how do you assure that everybody gets a fair chance?
Well, first of all, let me just say that DEI, and it's a construct of DEI, hasn't even been around long enough to even make that kind of a claim. We've had diversity of viewpoints, diversity ideas, not just in the federal government, but in the private sector for decades. The equity piece that was really introduced during the Biden-Harris administration at the federal level is the one that has a cause of concern because it ignores merit, it ignores skill sets, it ignores the ability to actually do the job and puts your demographic criteria at the front of the line before your actual qualifications. Look, I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to make sure that people who are getting jobs are qualified to do them. That is most important. But you can't put just diversity for diversity's sake ahead of qualifications. It's not 1972, it's 2025. We're in a different phase in the United States of America.
I never looked at DEI as really about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I look at it as a way to have power and control over people. For instance, if we continue to let DEI get momentum, it's just like ESG. We know the Democrats love to make laws that tell people and businesses what to do. And again, if it kept its momentum, I think it could get to a point where the state or federal government can say, well, your company's not diverse enough based on XYZ criteria, so we're going to penalize you with a fine or with whatever else. That's a lot of power and control to have over private businesses. I also think DEI could be subjective. It could be something where if your company is favored by the administration that's in place, then they wouldn't be looking too closely at you. But if your company isn't copacetic with the current administration, they could put you under a microscope and look for any little thing to ring you up on. And then obviously, we all know all of the criticisms of DEI, and that's just what they're talking about here. Equity, as we all know, is equality of outcomes, which is the complete opposite of a meritocracy. I don't know anyone on the right that is not in favor of equality of opportunity, that your skin color, your sexuality, your gender, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Everyone should have the same opportunity. But after that, it's on the individual to prove that they're the best person for the job. And finally, we always talk about how terrible DEI is for all the reasons I just discussed. But another thing we're finding out now is how much money the federal government has put into DEI. And not just in our country. I did a story the other day where they gave $1.5 million to Serbia so their workplaces could institute DEI. I mean, this is bananas. So getting rid of this DEI ridiculousness that no one wants anyway will not only get rid of that cancer, but it'll also save the country a lot of money. And it seems like a lot of these activist bureaucrats are forgetting the mission of whatever agency they're in and focusing on crap like this. DEI does not serve the American people whatsoever. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
And so I would argue that, yes, meritocracy does matter, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever the case might be. You have to have the skill set, you have to have the merit in order to acquire these jobs. Your diversity or your intersectionality cannot be the driving force, because that does discriminate against other people who might be more qualified for that job.
And what about people of color who are qualified but don't get the opportunities that people who are in the majority get because of the inclination of employers and legacy and other acceptance mechanisms.
Well, let's just dissect that for a second. There's always going to be a legacy bias because the truth of the matter is that people who have legacy or have different connections, they're going to provide those connections to their children. That's just a fact of life. That's not a white thing. That's a parent thing. Every parent does that regardless of their skin color. You could look in the NBA right now where you have a lot of prospects moving up who are now the children of former NBA players. Why is that? Because their parents, their fathers actually went through the NBA process, whether they were superstars like LeBron James or not superstars, but they were able to use their connections to help their children achieve a better path forward in professional sports. That happens in every industry in our country. So put legacy aside. The key piece is if you have the talent and the ability to actually walk in the door and earn a position, yes, you sometimes have to work your way up from the bottom. I started my career in 2003 out of college. Black kid in Southwest Florida, had no connections. I started at the bottom. I worked my way up. This is how it is supposed to work. But if you just supercharge somebody past the initial starting blocks, do they have the requisite skill to get there? And do they have the
If you like watching videos like this one, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
requisite experience to stay there? That's where some of the DEI stuff that has come out. And again, this is very recent. Like I said, diversity has been a staple of corporate America for decades. That's something that's been there. But the equity component, trying to move somebody ahead of the line simply because of their intersectionality, actually does not work. It is discriminatory. And if you don't believe me, ask Harvard how that's worked out, where they were sued in federal court for using an equity lens and ignoring the merit that was achieved by Asian American students.
Yeah. Representative Donalds, I know the case well. I cited it in the introduction. I appreciate you articulating the position of the administration. It's good to see you. We'll talk again soon. Hey, thanks.
You know, with all these race hustlers, it really shows their true colors because obviously all of them are happy when opportunities are taken away from the evil white man. But they show their true colors when, like the Harvard case, another minority is impacted negatively by DEI. They're silent. Suddenly they're not for all minorities. You know what I mean? And I still feel like DEI absolutely exposes the latent racism of the left. Like Byron Donalds said, it's 2025. Personally, I think anyone has the ability to do anything they want if they put their minds to it. Okay, with some limitations. I can't be in the NBA or NFL, but you know what I mean? If you want to achieve a goal, if you work hard, it may take a very long time and a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice, but you will get there. And I don't care what your race is. But in my opinion, the left looks at minorities as less than. So we have to help them up because they can't do it for themselves. I just feel like if I were a minority, that would be extremely patronizing and insulting to me. And Byron Donalds is right. Racism will always exist. It's passed down by the parents. He's right. It's a parent thing. It's just one of many evils that exist in our world, and it's always going to be there. But if a company does pass over the most qualified person because of their skin color, sexuality, gender, whatever, that person is going to succeed somewhere else. And you know who really loses in that situation? That company, because they didn't hire the best person. But I believe that happens less than 1% of the time, probably less than 0.5% of the time. Companies want to make money. The way you do that is by hiring the best people. So if you're running a business that way, you haven't thought it through very well. But we want to hear from you. What do you think about Donald Trump's efforts to stamp out DEI? And what did you think about this conversation between Chris Cuomo and Byron Donalds? Let us know. Anyway, as always, really appreciate you watching, and we will see you on the next one.